For one entire year, 777 doctors tried to wake Lee Jae-sung from his coma. The ruthless pharmaceutical billionaire had survived an assassination attempt that left a bullet lodged millimeters from his spine, but his brain had shut down completely. 70 billion won spent. Neurologists from Seoul National, Johns Hopkins, Great Ormond Street, Tokyo University, the most advanced medical technology money could buy, 24-hour monitoring, experimental treatments flown in from Switzerland. Yet every single morning for 365 days, the machines showed the same devastating results. Brain activity minimal, consciousness zero, prognosis hopeless. His 12-year-old son, Min-ho, refused to leave his father's bedside, sleeping in a chair every night, praying in Korean and broken English for a miracle the doctors said would never come. His mother had abandoned them both 6 months after the shooting, moved in with his father's business partner, left Min-ho completely and utterly alone in that cold hospital room turned bedroom. And as the months bled into a full year, even the boy's desperate prayers started to sound like goodbye, until 28-year-old Keisha Williams, a black American cleaning lady who'd been scrubbing the mansion's marble floors for exactly 3 weeks, noticed something impossible about the nasal spray bottle sitting on the medical cart. What she discovered would not only wake a man from a coma 777 specialists declared permanent, it would expose a conspiracy so twisted that an entire medical team had been slowly murdering him for 12 months while genuinely believing they were saving his life. Before we continue with this story, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about trust. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I need to know this story reached you. The Lee family mansion in Gangnam was the kind of wealth most people only saw in movies, the kind of wealth that keeps you up at night wondering if you were born to be poor. This mansion had 40 rooms, marble imported from Italy, chandeliers that cost more than houses in California, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River. And in the master bedroom on the 3rd floor, surrounded by medical equipment that beeped and hummed 24 hours a day, Lee Jae-sung lay dying in the bed where he'd once commanded empires. He was 45 years old. Before the shooting, he'd been the kind of man who fired employees without blinking, who crushed competitors, who built a pharmaceutical empire worth 8 trillion won by being more ruthless than everyone else. His presence choked everyone's throat. He ruled like a military dictator. People feared him, respected him. Some probably wanted him dead. One of them had actually tried. The assassination had happened at his own company's annual gala, right there in the ballroom with 500 witnesses. A waiter who wasn't really a waiter. A gun hidden in a champagne bucket. 3 shots fired. 2 missed. 1 didn't. The bullet had torn through Jae-sung's lower back, lodged itself against his spine, and somehow missed every vital organ. Surgeons said he was lucky. He'd survive. He'd walk again. He'd be fine. Except he wasn't fine. 2 days after surgery, he fell into a coma. Doctors called it complications from trauma, brain swelling, neurological damage, medical terminology that meant they had no idea what was actually wrong. His sweet, faithful, and lovely wife, Yun-hee, had stood by his bedside for exactly 6 months, playing the devoted spouse for the cameras, the grieving woman for the hospital staff. Oh, she was so loyal, one morning she decided to go on a mission to her husband's business partner's house. She disappeared, moved out, filed for separation, moved in with Park Sung-jin, her husband's business partner and childhood friend, left 12-year-old Min-ho with nannies and nurses and nobody who actually loved him. The boy had stopped going to school 3 months ago, just sat in that chair beside his father's bed, holding a hand that never squeezed back, talking to a man who never answered, praying to a God who seemed to have stopped listening.
777 doctors over 12 months. That's how many specialists had rotated through. Neurologists, coma specialists, brain trauma experts. Doctors flew in from 4 continents. Each one ran tests. Each one said the same thing. The billionaire's coma was irreversible, permanent vegetative state, no hope. And each one took their consultation fee and left Min-ho alone with his dying father.
Keisha Williams had been hired 3 weeks ago, and she wasn't supposed to be in Seoul at all. No, she was supposed to be working as an ER nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, saving lives, living the dream her mother had died, working 3 tedious jobs to give her. But life had gone sideways, fast. Her loving Uncle Raymond had gambling debts, serious debts, the kind of debts that came with men who didn't just break your legs when you couldn't pay, the kind that came with men who took your sweet niece instead. But Raymond knew the value of what he had. He wouldn't let it waste away, so he did what every good man would do. Fight his gambling addiction? Well, no. Raymond had actually tried to sell her, tried to hand her over to his loan sharks like she was property, like she was payment, like her nursing degree and her future meant nothing compared to the money he owed. Keisha had run, emptied her savings account, bought a one-way ticket to Seoul because it was far enough that Raymond's people wouldn't follow. She'd had nursing credentials, spoke English, figured she'd find medical work easily, but her visa situation was complicated. Her credentials weren't recognized in Korea, and the only job she could get without proper paperwork was cleaning. So she scrubbed toilets in a billionaire's mansion and tried not to think about the emergency room she'd left behind, the patients she could have saved, the life she'd been forced to abandon. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Kang, an elderly woman who was allergic to nonsense, had been very clear on Keisha's first day. Listen and listen good. You clean the master bedroom at 6 in the morning before the medical staff arrives. You don't touch the equipment. You don't speak to the boy. You don't ask questions about the family. You're invisible. Keisha had nodded. She understood. Being invisible was nothing new to her. She ate invisibility for breakfast her whole life. She'd been invisible her whole life. One more place wouldn't kill her. But something about Min-ho broke through her professional distance. The 12-year-old boy who slept in a chair, who woke up every morning and checked if his father was still breathing, who prayed in 2 languages because maybe God understood Korean better than English, who looked at Keisha with eyes that had seen too much loss for someone so young. She'd been 8 years old when her father died. She was just a kid who hoped her father would wake up from that bed and smile at her with those kind eyes. She remembered that specific kind of pain, that desperate hope, that feeling of drowning while everyone around you went about their normal lives. Her father, Marcus, had been a small business owner in Atlanta. Nothing like this billionaire wealth, just a modest construction company, a decent house, and a good life. Then he'd remarried after Keisha's mother passed. Patricia had seemed nice at first, like the best thing after bread and butter. Loving stepmother, caring wife, until Marcus started getting sick. The sickness had come on slowly, headaches, fatigue, sleeping more and more. Then one day he just didn't wake up. Coma. 8-year-old Keisha had sat beside his hospital bed exactly like Min-ho sat now, praying exactly the same desperate prayers. The doctors had been baffled. Tests showed nothing. No stroke, no tumor, no infection, just a brain that was shutting down for no reason anyone could explain. His faithful wife, Patricia, had brought special medication from a specialist, some headache treatment the doctors had supposedly prescribed. She'd administered it faithfully every day. Marcus had died 3 months later. Patricia had inherited everything, disappeared with the money, and 8-year-old Keisha had been left with nothing but questions nobody would answer, and a small medicine bottle she'd hidden under her bed because something about it felt wrong. She'd kept that bottle for 20 years of unanswered questions. Yes, for 20 years, Keisha kept her father's medical records, kept the memory of how nobody had listened when she'd said something wasn't right, kept the guilt of being too young, too powerless to save him. That guilt had driven her through nursing school, through her residency, through every shift in the ER where she'd fought to save people the way she couldn't save her father.
And now here she was, 7,000 miles from home, scrubbing floors like it's her favorite hobby instead of saving lives, watching another child lose another father to another mysterious coma.
This morning was different, though. This morning, the 6th day of her 4th week in the mansion, Keisha was cleaning the master bedroom when she smelled it. Oh, not again. Chemical. Medicinal. Exactly like her father's hospital room 20 years ago. The smell hit her like a punch from Muhammad Ali. It was so heavy it stopped her mid-motion with the mop in her hands. She stood frozen, breathing it in, her heart suddenly racing. The air conditioning hummed, the machines beeped their steady rhythm, and underneath it all, that smell, faint but unmistakable. Her hands started trembling before she even knew why. Then she saw the nasal spray bottle sitting on the medical cart beside Jae-sung's bed, right next to the blood pressure monitor and the feeding tube supplies. Standard medical equipment. Every nurse who came in used it. Saline spray to keep his nasal passages clear. Basic care, nothing unusual. Except Keisha's nursing training kicked in. She crossed to the cart, picked up the bottle, and read the label. Lee Med Pharmaceutical, Advanced Saline Solution, prescribed by the specialist for Lee Jae-sung, patient-specific treatment. Dr. Nam Ji-woo authorized. The label looked professional, official, but something was wrong. The font was slightly off. The paper quality was not quite hospital grade, and saline didn't need a prescription. Saline was saline. You bought it at any pharmacy. You didn't get it custom made by a pharmaceutical company. You definitely didn't get it prescribed by a specialist. Her heart was hammering now. She glanced at Minho, sleeping in his chair, mouth open, a little boy exhausted from another night keeping vigil. Keisha glanced at the door, back at the bottle. She should put it down, mind her business. She was just an ordinary cleaning lady. This wasn't her job. Except she couldn't stop seeing her father's hospital room, couldn't stop smelling that same chemical smell, couldn't stop remembering her stepmom Patricia bringing that special medication every single day, the medication that had killed him. Stay with me here, because what Keisha did next could have gotten her fired, deported, or worse. She pulled out her phone, photographed the label from every angle. Then she went to the bathroom, found the regular saline spray the household staff used for cleaning supplies and minor first aid, brought both bottles back, compared them side by side under the lamplight. The differences were subtle, but there. Different manufacturers, different batch number format, different label quality. But the biggest difference was the smell. She opened both bottles, inhaled carefully. The regular saline smelled like nothing. Slightly salty water, that's it. The special prescribed saline smelled chemical, medicinal, wrong, exactly like her father's medicine had smelled. Keisha's hands were shaking now. She needed to test this, needed to know for sure. But how? She couldn't just walk into a lab and ask them to analyze a billionaire's medication. She couldn't go to the police with nothing but a smell and a feeling. But at the same time, she couldn't just ignore this feeling. Then she remembered. Her last day at Grady Memorial, saying goodbye to colleagues, exchanging contact information. One of the ER pharmacists had mentioned he'd taken a position in Seoul. What was his name? She scrolled through her phone. Found it. James Park, Korean American, spoke both languages, worked at Seoul International Hospital now. She sent a message, hands still trembling. Hey James, long shot, but are you still in Seoul? Need a huge favor. Can you run a discrete analysis on a medication sample? Off the books? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, Keisha. Yeah, I'm here. What's going on? She typed back. Can't explain over text. Can we meet? Tonight? His response came fast. You sound scared. Yeah, tonight works. 7 p.m., coffee shop in Itaewon. She sent him the address. The day crawled by. Keisha cleaned like a robot, mind racing through possibilities like a supercar with no brakes. What if she was wrong? What if this was just paranoia from her own trauma? What if she was seeing conspiracies where there was just tragedy? But what if she was right? What if someone was doing to Jae-sung exactly what Patricia had done to her father? At 6:45, she left the mansion, took the subway to Itaewon, and found the coffee shop. James was already there, looking concerned. She sat down across from him, pulled out the small vial where she'd carefully transferred a sample of the nasal spray. "I think someone's keeping a billionaire in a coma with this. I think they've been doing it for a year, and I think 777 doctors have missed it because they're all using this medication thinking it's helping, when it's actually the thing keeping him unconscious." James stared at her. "Keisha, that's insane." She met his eyes. "My father was murdered the same way when I was 8. Nobody believed me then either. Will you test it? I need your help, James." He took the vial, studied her. "Give me 3 days. If there's something wrong, we'll know."
3 days felt like 3 years in a room full of boredom. Keisha went to work, cleaned the floors, watched Minho pray, watched the nurses administer the nasal spray 3 times daily, watched Jae-sung lie there, trapped in whatever darkness the medication created. Watched and said nothing, because she had no proof yet, just suspicion, just fear, just the memory of being 8 years old and powerless. On the 3rd night, her phone rang. James. His voice was shaking. "Where did you get this sample?" Her heart stopped. "What did you find?" Long pause, then, "This isn't saline, Keisha. It's a sedative cocktail, propofol derivative, paralytic agent, something else I can't even identify. This would keep someone in a medically induced coma indefinitely. Whoever's been using this has been poisoning someone for however long they've been administering it." The world tilted. She sat down hard on her apartment floor. "You're sure?" "I ran it 4 times. I'm absolutely sure. This is attempted murder. You need to go to the police." But she couldn't. Not yet. Because she knew how this worked. She'd lived it. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever known something was wrong but nobody would listen, stay with me. Because what happens next proves that sometimes the truth doesn't come from the powerful, but from the powerless who refuse to stay that way. Keisha started investigating, quietly, carefully. During her cleaning shifts, she looked for documents, found authorization forms in the study. The special nasal spray had been prescribed 1 year ago, right after Jae-sung fell into the coma. The prescription came from a specialist at a private clinic. The clinic's records showed it was owned by a holding company. The holding company was owned by Park Sung-jin, Jae-sung's business partner, the man his ex-wife now lived with, the man who stood to inherit control of the pharmaceutical empire if Jae-sung died or was declared permanently incapacitated. She kept digging through files she had no right to access, found financial records showing embezzlement, 5 billion won over 18 months, found emails between Sung-jin and Yan-hee from before the shooting, love letters like Romeo and Juliet, except their hearts were dark, plans to be together, discussions about waiting for the right moment to strike so they can have all the time in the world to devour each other. Found the payment record to the fake waiter. The assassination wasn't random, it was planned, and when Jae-sung survived, they'd needed a backup plan. Keisha was photographing documents in Sung-jin's office when she heard footsteps in the hallway. His home office was in the Coma billionaire's mansion. Her blood turned to ice. She wasn't supposed to be in here, wasn't supposed to be cleaning this room. If someone caught her, if they saw what she was doing, everything would be over. The footsteps got closer. She could hear voices, Yan-hee, Sung-jin, coming this way. Keisha looked around frantically. The office had nowhere to hide, just a desk, bookshelves, filing cabinets. The door was opening. No time to run. She dove behind the desk, pressed herself against the wall, and held her breath like her life depended on it. And it sure did. They walked in. Yan-hee's heels clicking on marble. Sung-jin's voice low, tense. The doctors are starting to ask questions. Why hasn't he deteriorated more? Why is he stable after a year when they predicted he'd be dead by now? Yan-hee's response was cold. Because we're keeping him alive. The spray maintains the coma, but doesn't kill him. That was the point. We need him alive, but unconscious, until the guardianship transfer goes through.
And if he somehow wakes up? Sung Jin asked. Yeon-hee laughed, an awful sound. He won't. 777 doctors have failed. Trust me, one little nasal spray bottle isn't going anywhere. And even if someone suspected, who would they tell? Who would believe a conspiracy this close to home? They left 5 minutes later. Keisha stayed behind the desk another 10, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. They just confessed, just admitted everything, but she had no recording, no proof, just her word against theirs, the word of an ordinary black cleaning lady against a billionaire's faithful ex-wife and his business partner. She needed more than overheard conversations. She needed something undeniable. That night she made her decision. She couldn't go to the police yet because powerful people had powerful lawyers and she was nobody. She couldn't go to the doctors because they'd been using the poison for a year, and admitting it meant admitting malpractice. But she could do one thing. She could stop the poisoning. During her early morning shift 2 days later, while the overnight nurse was in the kitchen preparing breakfast and Min-ho was still asleep, Keisha switched the bottles, took the poisoned nasal spray from the medical cart, replaced it with real saline she'd bought from 3 different pharmacies, mixed together, poured into an identical bottle with an identical label she'd printed. Perfect copy. Nobody would notice unless they were looking for it. Then she waited patiently.
Day 1. Nothing changed. Jae-sung remained unconscious. Machines beeped. The billionaire's son, Min-ho, prayed. Medical staff came and went. Day 2. Still nothing. Keisha started to doubt. Maybe the poison was too deep in his system. Maybe 12 months couldn't be reversed. Day 3. His fingers moved. Just once. So subtle the machines didn't register it, but Keisha saw it while changing his bedding. His right hand twitched. After 12 months of absolute stillness, it was everything. Day 4, rapid eye movement. Day 5, increased brain activity on the monitors. The neurologist was stunned, kept running tests, kept saying this was impossible. Day 6, Jae-sung opened his eyes. 3 seconds, then closed them. But Min-ho had seen it, screamed for the nurses. The little boy cried so hard he couldn't breathe. Day 7, he opened his eyes and they stayed open, confused, unfocused, but open, looking around, looking at his son, looking at Keisha. The hospital went crazy, called it a miracle, started running tests. Keisha documented everything, every day of improvement. The timeline that proved when the poisoning stopped was when he started waking. Day 10, Jae-sung spoke, one word, Min-ho, his son's name. His son climbed into the bed, held on to his father, and cried a year's worth of tears. Day 12, Jae-sung was sitting up, speaking, weak but conscious. Yeon-hee and Sung Jin came to visit. Keisha watched from across the room, dusting the same shelf for the 3rd time. Watched Yeon-hee's face when she saw him awake, the flash of terror she couldn't hide. Watched Sung Jin's hand shake when he gripped Jae-sung's hand. Watched them both glance at the medical cart at the nasal spray bottle that should have been keeping him unconscious. They knew something was wrong. Day 14, Keisha went to the police, brought James's lab analysis, brought the poisoned bottle, brought photographed financial records and emails, brought the timeline, brought everything. Detective Lee listened without interrupting, looked at the evidence, then said, "You know they'll say you're lying. You're a cleaning lady. They're powerful. This will be very hard to prove." Keisha nodded. "I know, but I have something they don't. I have a man who's awake when he should be in a permanent coma. That's hard to explain away." Detective Lee smiled. "You're either very brave or very crazy. I'm a woman who watched her father die from this exact thing when I was 8, and nobody believed me. I'm not letting it happen again." The investigation moved fast. Police questioned Dr. Nam, who broke down, admitted he'd thought he was prescribing legitimate medication. He was devastated to learn he'd been poisoning his patient. The specialist confessed next after 5 hours of intense interrogation. He had cut a deal, testified that Sung Jin, the billionaire's business partner and childhood friend, had paid him to create the medication, that Yeon-hee had known and signed all authorizations. The paper trail was overwhelming. 3 weeks after Jae-sung woke, police arrested Park Sung-jin and Choi Yeon-hee. The trial lasted 4 months. Defense lawyers tried to destroy Keisha's credibility.
Foreign worker, questionable visa, no medical authority in Korea. Why should anyone believe her? But then the prosecution called James Park, respected pharmacist, lab analysis, confirmed poison, called Detective Lee, timeline evidence, security footage, called Dr. Nam, tearful confession, called the specialist, full testimony, called Jae-sung. He walked to the stand, looked at his ex-wife, at his former best friend, said, "I remember dreaming I was trying to wake up and something kept pulling me back down. That wasn't a coma, that was a prison. They put me there. She kept me there. And she," he pointed at Keisha, "let me out." The jury took 4 hours, found both defendants guilty on all charges. Sung Jin got 25 years, Yo and he got 22. Both would serve in actual prison, not the comfortable kind rich people usually bought their way into. The judge made sure of that. 6 months later, Jae-sung called Keisha into his office. She was nervous, still just a cleaning lady, still worried. He looked at her for a long moment. "Why did you save me? I wasn't a good nan before this. Why risk everything?" She'd thought carefully about her answer. "Because I couldn't save my father. I couldn't even give him the justice he deserved. Someone poisoned him when I was 8. Nobody listened. He died. When I smelled that smell, when I saw that bottle, I had a choice. Mind my business or do what I couldn't do at 8. Speak up. I chose to speak up." Jae-sung had been quiet, then offered her a position, Director of Patient Advocacy, creating protocols to prevent medical abuse, a foundation in her father's name, the Marcus Williams Memorial Fund.
But more than that, he'd listened. When she'd told him about Patricia, about the medication bottle she still had after 20 years, about the medical records, he'd used his resources to investigate. They'd found Patricia, living in Florida under a different name, with another husband who was mysteriously sick, dying from an unexplained neurological condition. The police had arrested her 3 weeks ago, charged her with 2 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of murder from 20 years ago. Keisha's father's case had been reopened. Justice, delayed by 2 decades, but finally coming. Min-ho had started calling Keisha Nuna, older sister. He'd gone back to school, made friends, smiled again. But he still visited his father every day after classes, still held his hand, still prayed, though now the prayers were thank you instead of please. The 3 of them, Jae-sung, Min-ho, and Keisha, had become something like family, not by blood, not by obligation, by the strange bond that forms when someone saves your life and you save theirs right back. 1 year after Jae-sung woke, Keisha stood at her father's grave in Atlanta, told him everything, about Seoul, about the spray, about justice. "I couldn't save you, Daddy, but I saved someone else's father. Someone else's son gets to keep his dad." She buried the medicine bottle she'd kept for 20 years, let it go, let the guilt go, let 8-year-old her rest. Then flew back to Seoul, back to the foundation, back to Min-ho, who needed a sister, back to Jae-sung, who needed reminding that humanity mattered more than profit. 777 doctors had failed to save Lee Jae-sung, but one cleaning lady with a memory and a refusal to watch another child lose another father had done what all that expertise couldn't. She'd paid attention, trusted her instincts, acted when it could have cost everything, proved that invisible doesn't mean powerless. Min-ho was 14 now, talking about medical school, about becoming a doctor who listens. Jae-sung was 47, running his company with conscience, making amends. Keisha was 30, finally honoring her father by preventing what happened to him from happening to anyone else. 3 of them, odd family, Korean billionaire, his son, Black American woman who'd scrubbed their floors and saved their lives, breaking bread every Sunday. Proof that sometimes the worst conspiracies get stopped by the powerless who refuse to stay that way. Thank you for staying until the end. You're the real one. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about who gets listened to and why, watch the next video on my channel.
More invisible people doing impossible things. More truth that needs telling. See you there. Thank you for watching.